Welcome to this week's edition of More Insights and Strategy Game Time Tech Podcast. I'm Melody Brue, and I am joined by my co-host Robert Kramer, VP and Principal Analyst, and my partner in the sports technology vertical. And today we have a very special treat. We have another one of our analysts, Anshel here with us, who has been following one of the things that we're here to talk about for a really long time, which is Snapdragon and their sponsorship of Manchester United. But first of all, let's talk about Anshel. First of all, welcome to the Game Time Tech Pod. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you very much.
So Anshel, you're a big sports fan, Padres shirt on and all, but also you do everything. Give a quick rundown, because I will always just say you do all of our computing, personal computing, spatial computing, AR, XR, VR, all the things, but maybe give a quick rundown of kind of your focus.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like the client computing guy. So smartphones, PCs, I also cover XR, 5G, and I also cover most of the semiconductors that go in all those things. So, CPUs, GPUs, memory. I've been covering hardware for 15 plus years. I used to work in hardware prototyping, and yeah, I'm definitely a hardware guy through and through. And I still build my own PCs to this day. So, yeah, I love photography too. So I technically cover imaging and sensors as well. But that's like a little bit more of a hobby, but I still I know about CMOS and all the components
That's pretty
on the
cool.
camera. But yeah, I take good photos of the places I go and the things I review. And yeah, I love sports, and I love the intersection of sports and tech. So I'm excited to be on and to join you guys this episode and hopefully for future episodes as well.
Yeah, we hope so
Thank
too.
you.
Definitely, we'll do that. So, you've seen, obviously, you've seen a few of our podcasts before, and one of them being the IBM at the Masters, and we got a very unique perspective from you because you were using the Vision Pro. We were using the app. We were talking about the app, but just before we get into other stuff, I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on the Vision Pro, what those experiences are like, your experience with the Masters app, and just kind of, any of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty narrow window, right? Because the Masters doesn't go for that long. But I heard some people say that it was really cool and that I should try it out. And I have a Vision Pro, so I was like, of course I need to try it. Serious FOMO. And I downloaded it. I will say I am not the biggest fan of golf. It's probably one of the few sports that I care the least about. But the Masters is the Masters, so I was like, fine. I know a few of the people who were playing. And it was really cool because it was a very clear, ground up design specifically for XR, where you had this, multi-angle perspective where you had the video stream in front of you here, but then you had a 3D representation of the hole on the left, and every single stroke had a trajectory for it, and you could follow each different player, every golfer on each hole, and go through each of their strokes and see how they hit it, what the speed was, what the trajectory. You could blow up the trajectory and all the 3D mapping data, so you could actually see exactly how they hit it. You could switch between any player, and you could there was just a list of them. I don't even know most of who those people are, but you could. It was almost like a self-guided experience. But then you could also have 4 different streams of 4 different golfers going at the same time. It was a very customized or customizable experience, and you could tell that there was so much data that was being ingested and organized and then reset up through the UI to enable a user to find, I just want to follow this golfer, or I want to be on, I want to see how they golfed on this hole. And it was just cool. It felt like how an XR experience with sports should be. This is contrary to, the NBA app, which is cool, but literally all you got was just like, oh look, you can watch 4 games at the same time, and it's like, okay, that's nice. Look,
Well,
there's some like
well,
stats, but it felt very 2D. The MLB app was a little better because you at least got like the strike zone and a little bit of like a 3D perspective there,
Mhm.
while you could also watch the game and see what was going on. But this just felt like a native experience that was like elevated above what everything else was doing.
which is interesting because 10 years ago when we watched golf, it was, if you didn't like it, it wasn't really something that you would want to do. It wasn't conducive to that person. And now that you said you're not the best, the most fan of golf, this gave you a unique experience. And I think that's what they're trying to do. That we always struggled, we wanted to see certain players. We had to wait for their rotation on the TV. Now you're able to pick and choose not only the player, but the angle of the hole. It gave you a different perspective. So your thought is going out of this now looking back, you think it's something you would recommend? The app, the Vision Pro, or both?
I mean, the Vision Pro is an interesting thing because it's still very expensive point of entry at $3,500. So either you have to have more money than you know what to do with, or you have to be like a developer, or in my case, somebody who covers the XR industry that needs to have access to Apple's ecosystem. But right now, I think it's too early to say that like I would buy this for just the Masters, or maybe any other, or just sporting events. But bit by bit, the value chain is improving, and I think watching 3D movies in it is actually quite impressive. So that's an opportunity, and people love flying with it, and I get it. Like it's just so much better than everything else. But there are alternatives out there, like X Real makes these much smaller, lighter, cheaper glasses that you can effectively do the same thing with. So it's not perfect. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. You can read my review on Forbes. It's very lengthy. But in general, I would say it is a premium experience. And I think what you're seeing is a lot of companies are using this as a platform to experiment and to plan for the future and build toward the future. Because if you don't build this now and you want to deploy it when there's scale, you're already behind because you've not built that infrastructure and figured out where the bottlenecks are ahead of time. So I think this is a good way for companies to prototype and test and show off their leadership in the space.
Well said.
I think one of the really interesting things has been the sports, because I've heard people say like, this is going to be the end of sports bars. I'm like, well, no, probably not, because people still want to socialize and have a life. But I do think that, that it definitely has stood out for a lot of people as a very useful thing. If you, like you said, price point aside, if you can watch sports on it. But we will link your Forbes article in the show notes so people can read a full review of your very lengthy review. But let's switch to our topic of the day. Robert, take it away.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Qualcomm and Snapdragon. I was actually, end of last year, I went to Manchester, England, and I attended a Manchester, United soccer match. Phenomenal. And when I was there, I learned a little bit more about what's going on with the jersey and the branding of Snapdragon and Man U. So released just recently is the news of Snapdragon and the initiative of the branding of the front of the jersey. What are you most excited about with Snapdragon? The activations that this is going towards.
I think it's really interesting because if you look at where Qualcomm has been on its journey, and looking at the different sports franchises they've worked with in the past, right? They've worked with Mercedes, and they're working with all the San Diego local teams. I think there's something unique here because Manchester is such a big club, right? I think the stats that Qualcomm shared with us was there's something like 1.1 billion fans worldwide, which is kind of crazy. Like I can't think of a single team in the world that has that kind of
Crazy.
recognition. And the biggest fan bases are in China and in India. So those are really big opportunities for the Snapdragon brand to get recognized and to continue to build that as a premium brand. And there's so much that they can do with the Snapdragon brand and Manchester United. And with this launch, they used an AR experience on a smartphone to enhance the quality of the launch and get fans engaged with the Snapdragon brand on smartphones, which is one of Qualcomm's biggest businesses. So I think this is a really interesting launch, and I think the timing is really good for Qualcomm because they're also launching these new PCs, and I've got a few of them as well. This is the HP. But yeah, they're trying to push out PCs. They've got automotive stuff going. I'm sure there's going to be an automotive push at some point or another. So I think a lot of these opportunities with Snapdragon and co-branding and co-marketing are going to be really fun. And I already saw on Twitter, there was a Manchester thing where someone was wearing the new kit, and then it said there was like a little hashtag that's not shot on Snapdragon. So they're using Snapdragons to take photos, but also get recognition for Snapdragon is actually producing these images. And it's just there's a lot of really cool, interesting opportunities for activations and brand recognition.
That's great.
Yeah, what are some of the specific activations? Because I saw that if you can scan the Snapdragon logo and get exclusive content. Have you seen any of that stuff?
I haven't actually done those scans yet, but I do know that they're already working with some OEMs to continue to build these engagements with Snapdragon and Manchester United. And I believe that there's on the AR side, I think it's something like there's some digital content that's associated with it. So I don't think there's anything physical yet. But I think they're very excited to move this forward, and they're also going to kind of help modernize Old Trafford as well, because there's plans to do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'll be interesting to see because I think this is just the beginning. I think they put this AR app out to get people familiar with its existence, and I think they're going to keep pushing content through it throughout the years of this relationship. But also, there's going to be some matches here in the U.S. at Snapdragon Stadium.
Yes, end of July.
And that that's I think the end of July, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's again against Real Betis. So hopefully I'll be home. I think I will be, and I'll probably go to that. And hopefully it's a night game because I do not want to be out in the sun in the middle of summer.
Oh my gosh, I feel you there. I was just out in the sun in the middle of in Nashville all for 5 days, and I came back sick, so excuse that. But yeah, I read interesting. So more than 60%, and you were right about the 1.1 billion fans. More than 60% of Manchester United followers are aware of Snapdragon. Out of that group, 86% said they trusted the brand, and 80% said they loved it. Loved, not just like, but loved. So I think, there's really a part of this that's not just about like putting a logo on a jersey. There's the experiences and everything, but I think one of the most important things I know, coming from former CMO, from a real branding perspective here, is the ability to connect that Snapdragon logo, which you showed on your PC. I actually happen to be having my bone broth out of my Snapdragon cup with the little fireball logo here. But connect that technology so they're looking to like good fan experiences, to good technical experiences, so that they're looking for that fireball when they're buying other devices. So like you said, Anshel, you buy cameras, you buy PCs, you buy phones, you buy all of these things. So how much of an impact you have the fireball?
Yeah,
There?
this is the modem. Also, fireball branding. It's everywhere. Like, look for the fireball.
Right. So you've been following Snapdragon since forever, since it started, but also you're kind of, I know you've spent some time with the Snapdragon insiders, who are part of the whatever that trek is to Hawaii every year. How much do you think that this impacts a decision for a device, and what's your feeling on, like, yes, it's like, are we going back to kind of, sort of the Intel Inside sort of branding of this fireball means something to consumers, and now there's a sound attached to it as well, which we talked about several I don't know, months ago. But how much do you think that impacts? And I would guess that in different regions, this is going to be different. But how much do you think that impacts the buyer decision?
I think what it does is it enables the OEM to offer a more premium product. So it's one of those things where Qualcomm and Snapdragon are not actually selling you something because they don't sell anything. They sell a chip to an OEM, and then the OEM sells you something. So what Qualcomm is really selling you is, in this situation, they're selling a premium tier, a premium brand, and that's what Snapdragon offers. And it's a premium experience, and that experience can only be had on devices with the Snapdragon. That's the idea behind all of this brand marketing is, if you want the best chip in your phone, it's got to be a Snapdragon. And I think when you look at like where the world is moving in terms of smartphone, let's say smartphones, right? Right now, Samsung is struggling with their foundry, and they might end up going 100% Samsung, 100% Qualcomm on their next generation of phones. Why? Because it's a premium. Like, for Samsung, they might end up losing some margin, because they're not using their own chips, but it's not a downgrade to go to Qualcomm. It's an upgrade. And if you look at if you look at people online, whenever Samsung launches a phone with their own chip versus a Snapdragon, people are like, we want the Snapdragon. So there's a clear recognition of premium tier, premium quality. And I think that's really what the purpose of this program is to get recognition for a premium product and to make sure that their partners, their OEMs, are able to partake in that experience and deliver that final result, but also elevate their products to a point where, when they're comparing against their competition, maybe they even ship the same device with different chips in different regions. People are going to gravitate towards the Snapdragon. And that's going to happen in cars. It's going to happen in PCs. It's going to happen in phones. It's happen on headphones. I don't know if a lot of people don't know this, but like the new Sonos headphones, those are a Qualcomm chipset. And, Sonos doesn't do something unless they absolutely have to. And they chose to go with Qualcomm because that was the premium experience. So there's a lot of that happening, and they're so diversified now that it's really important to have a strong premium brand associated with what Qualcomm is doing. It doesn't happen to be a Qualcomm brand, but it is Snapdragon, which is still part of the Qualcomm family.
Well, if you translate that to sports technology and the Snapdragon on the front of the jersey, they're elevating the fan experience. Like Mel said, it's beyond just the sponsorship, but it's also that billion fans getting them as clients, right? And then all those who will look upon this as Snapdragon, continues to grow, which it already is grown, obviously a tremendous amount. But that sponsorship is apropos to what they're doing with the technology and in the industries that they're in. So as we close out, any further thoughts on Anshel or Mel?
Not really. I mean, I would say that I'm really excited for this as somebody who's been, playing and watching soccer their entire life. It's exciting for a San Diego company to be working closely with arguably one of the most recognized clubs in the world. I will say, for the purposes of this, I'm a Manchester United fan, but in general, I'm a Chelsea fan. My team sucks, so I'm happy to just go to a game and watch a good match. I will say the match that they did have in San Diego last year was against Ryan Reynolds' club. I think it was Wrexham, and it was a bit of a messy match, one of the messiest soccer matches I've watched in terms of penalties and injuries. They had to cart somebody off, so hopefully this Real Betis match is a little bit cleaner and a little bit less dangerous. But in general, I love watching soccer, and we're getting an MLS team in San Diego finally. So I'll finally get to wear that jersey. But I should have worn my San Diego Wave jersey because that's my local team for now.
That is, yeah. Well, my dad's from Manchester, so I have to be a Manchester fan. But I think, one thing just to point out, and back to the branding here, is that a lot of companies think that B2B branding has to be boring and it has to be directly B2B. And I actually had a conversation a couple of months ago with Don McGuire, who's the CMO at Qualcomm and responsible for this whole program. And he said, I was like, what would you say to companies who think B2B branding has to be just, kind of one way and boring? And he was like, I don't look at it as B2B. I look at it as B2P, business to people. And it doesn't matter who the buyer is on the other end, whether it's the OEM or the partner or whether it's the end consumer. So I think that's just the really interesting kind of way to look at this in terms of the branding aspect of it. But that's all I've got.
Well, everything's been great in this episode. Thank you for joining Anshel and Mel and Robert from More Insights and Strategy. Thank you for attending our latest version of Game Time Tech. We'll look forward to see everybody at our next episode. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Anshel.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.